Need a motion to accept the agenda? Moved by
Second.
Mr. Lawrence, second by Dr. Tisdale. Any questions? All in favor? 4-0, motion carried. All right. Mayor's report?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask, a moment of silence, not only for Bill Prince, but also, the tragedies we had this weekend in this week in El Paso and also Dayton. But as far as Bill, Bill served the city of Biloxi from 1986 to his retirement in 2005. He oversaw the tremendous boom that we were seeing at the advent of casinos and casino resorts. Bill died on the 19th of July, and our condolences to his family and his friends. So just let's be silent for a moment for all of those things. Okay, well, thank you very much. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Well, let me ask Mike to set this whole thing up.
I put at your place something entitled Fiscal Year 2020 Budget Highlights. I just wanted to be able to read those for the record. What's in our budget as we sit today is a 2% increase in employer or city contribution to the municipal retirement system, 684 budget positions proposed for this year. That's a four position decrease from 2019. An annual principal and interest lease payment for Fire Station number 7, the first of 15 of those payments. An annual principal and interest lease payment for 2 fire trucks, the first of 7 payments. 9 additional firefighters for new Station 10. The purchase of 16 fully equipped police vehicles. Those will replace a similar number of vehicles that will go out of service and then be sold. Vehicle purchases for parks, 2, engineering, 1, and $150,000 in capital for vehicles and equipment for public works. An upgrade to our IT firewall to achieve federal compliance for police information, and a new sound system for the council chamber. Those are the highlights of what's in the budget. For the record, what's not in the budget is there is no citywide pay increase in the budget. There is no change to what the employees pay for PERS. There's no change to what the employees pay for medical insurance. And there's no increased funding for longevity pay, meaning it remains capped at the current amount. What we'll do today, in addition to answering your questions about those items, is that we've got a report by CTA that you requested, non-department, a report by CASA that you requested, a report which I will make for the Center for Nonviolence, a new request that we received this week, and also requests from the Harrison County Soil and Water Conservation District. Those were both new requests. That's what we hope to achieve today. And the other thing I would like to announce, or let the clerk announce, that our public hearing, we're driving towards that infamous public hearing that we have to have on the budget. That public hearing will be held on the evening.
September 3rd.
Sorry?
September 3rd at 6.
September the 3rd. So we're in good shape time-wise. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Okay, does that conclude the mayor's report? Okay, no departmental reports, council reports, George? No reports.
No
Dr. Tisdale?
report.
Mr. Barrett? And I also have no report. We're going to move on to the public agenda, citizen comments, total allotted time 45 minutes, 3 minutes per person. Would anyone on my left would like to come up and speak? Anyone on my right? I didn't have an actual copy of the agenda. For discussion, okay. All right, well, I like to, okay, well, no one in the public agenda, so I guess we'll move on into our discussion. We'll on to our discussion.
What I'd suggest, Councilman, is I would suggest that we call for these reports. These are reports you asked for. The first one would be CTA. And Kevin Coggan is here to talk about the budget. You'll look at the handout I gave you for the non-department budget, and you'll see that the request is for $333,000 for fiscal year '20.
Okay.
Kevin,
That being
you wanna-
said, Ms. Scoggins?
Have some fun at the mic there.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Lean into that mic.
Discuss, okay?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Discuss our budget request. I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about what we're doing this year, fiscal year 2019. We've got our core services, fixed route bus services, that you were funding at $320,000. In addition to that, we had Route 32 that we ran in the Pops Ferry Road area. That City of D'Iberville cost shared with you.
Okay. What route was that again?
Route 32.
Route 32?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Pops Ferry. And finding my notes here, I've got a lot of information here trying to anticipate what questions you may ask. So in addition to the $320,000 for the fixed route bus services, Biloxi cost shared the local match with the City of D'Iberville. Biloxi $23,650, D'Iberville $11,825. We ran that for the 6-month demonstration period and then terminated that route due to low ridership. I want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to do that particular route and being responsive to your citizens in that area. That brings me to this year, what I'm asking for. I've got all this detailed information I provide for you all every year. We're asking for an increase for fiscal year 2020 from $320,000 to $333,000, which is a 13% increase or 4%. Reason why we're asking for the increase is because our operating costs have gone up. Labor costs are up, health insurance is up, fuel is up 7.7%, our liability insurance is up 11%. So the cost of doing business is gone up, so we are requesting a 4% or $13,000 a year increase in our operating subsidy. If you look at the third to the last page on all of these documents, it's got the worksheet where all the money comes from to fund your routes. It's based on hours of service we're going to provide and the cost per hour. So we're projecting we're going to be providing 25,000 hours of fixed route bus service in fiscal year 2020 at a cost of $73 an hour. That's $1,825,000 is what the cost is to provide that service in fiscal year 2020. Below that, towards the bottom, you see funding sources fiscal year 2020. In the middle, it's got FTA, PM, fare box, FTA operating, advertising revenue, all those different sources of revenue, self-generated revenue, that we bring to the table to fund your route. And after we projected all of the grants that we can get, state and federal and Harrison County subsidies and all the self-generated income like Farebox, we're projecting a funding shortage of $13,750. So that is the reason why we're asking for a $13,000 or 4% increase for this coming fiscal year. I can give you a lot more information and bore you with all that, something you may not be interested in listening to, but if you've got some specific questions or concerns, I'd be happy to address those.
Ms. Lawrence?
Yeah, we've always given, pretty much always given you 280,000, and last year we increased it for that extra route, which we dropped. So, I mean, that's 53,000. That's a ton of money.
The-
You know,
what-
we always was 280.
I'm
pretty much
sorry.
consistent, $280,000.
The-
And we had the same problem in the city. Like you said, price of gas, and we had the same problem. And we just can't fund everybody and have a deficit budget, you know? So, I mean, everybody's got to cut it sometimes, so it's hard to pass increases for anything. We're trying to cut it out of the city. I mean, that's my feeling, but I mean, well, we gave 280 to the CTA, pretty much 260 to 280. It's always in that park. And when you, we added a route coming out of Dalville, we said we'd take the shot, added, that's why it was 320 last year. We added that 35,000, whatever it was to it. So anyway, that's my take on it. Yeah, things are tough, things went up, everything goes up. But sometimes you gotta do something yourself. Just like the city, you know, it's something we gotta pull back on certain things. You know, maybe we can't fund all the police and fire department. That's pretty important for us, you know. Yeah, I know the service is good for the city of Biloxi, the CTA. Although we do a good job, that's not my problem. My problem is $53,000 increase. That's my problem.
Well, the $320,000 that you're currently giving us this year was for the base service. That did not include Route 32.
I know, but
So
I'm just
you
saying,
you paid us more than $320,000. It was $320,000 plus the subsidy, the $26,875 for the D'Iberville route. So the $320,000 is for the fixed route bus services, excluding Route 32. So we're asking for a $13,000 increase above the 320.
Kevin, I have a question I'd like to ask, just to
Sure.
drill down. Part of the subsidy that reduces how much we pay is advertising, your ability to
Yes.
earn money in advertising. As you know, and as the council knows, we're in the process of removing a lot of benches in the city. Is there a possibility going forward in future years, or even maybe later in this year, that you could replace some of those benches in the city with CTA benches that would draw some advertising, that would reduce the subsidy in future years?
Yes, we are looking at that going forward. And we're also hoping that we're going to see an increase in ridership, which will generate more fare box revenue, which will reduce the shortage. So we are looking at ways to be more cost efficient. We are looking at ways to generate more income. The advertising revenue is one of the areas that we see an opportunity to generate more income than we're doing right now. So we are looking at all of those things.
I noticed that you got a lot of buses running around with political signs on them right now, so that must be helpful.
Yes, if we had if we had election every year, we would be in much better shape with our advertising revenue.
well, I still stand by my statement, you know. It's hard to increase anybody, but we try to cut everything in the city. So I figure if we went back to that 280 like we normally give you, then, I mean, that's up to you then, how you handle it. You know, would you increase your profit, whatever, you know, that really never affects us, because everything we always done has always been pretty much the same amount of money, even when you have good years and bad years, you know. And right now, we're straining ourselves in the city of Biloxi. So you have to look at it that way from my point, you know, we got to take care of everybody.
Okay. Dr. Tisdale, I just want to make a note, Councilman Deming is on the cell phone, and he's on speaker. Councilman Tisdale?
And by the way, he never looked better. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Leonard's question, and I don't know how much study you've done in considering the benches and advertising, but what do you think, and it may be a premature question, but what do you think might the cities, what do you think our subsidy might be reduced if you did do the advertising on the benches and so forth? Do you have an approximation or even a rough figure?
It would be directly proportionate. So any amount of increase in advertising revenues would reduce the local subsidy dollar for dollar. because that's strictly money we can use for
So
local
if there were,
matters.
so if there were 10 new CTA benches out there and they generated 500 in revenue, that would reduce our subsidy $5,000.
What the challenge is with some of these companies that want to come in, and the one Mr. Leonard specifically is alluding to, we're talking to them, but they come in and they put the benches, and they sell the advertising revenue, and they give us a small percentage. Right now, we're selling it ourselves. So it gets complicated. What we're looking at is opportunities to sell more of it ourselves as opposed to contracting it out. But to answer your question specifically, every dollar of revenue that we generated in advertising sales reduces the need for your local subsidy. That's correct.
Right. And if I understood correctly, you're asking for $333,000.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
$333,000. Last year it was 343, but that included the D'Iberville route. Without the D'Iberville route, I think you were scheduled for 320,000. And a number of years ago, I don't have the data in front of me, I want to say it was like 280 and then maybe 295,000. And then we looked at a number of different routes over the
Yes.
years, and some made and some didn't. We just couldn't get the D'Iberville Biloxi route along Pops Ferry going. I can't think of anything. I mean, it pretty much is what it is. I can't think of anything else to ask. Thank you.
And Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, do you know the dates when we went from 280 to 295 to 320? Do you know what years that was?
Yes, I have that.
I was waiting to let Kevin answer, but I've got a little cheat sheet here that says in 2017 it was 280,700. In 2018 it became
Hold on.
317, 281.
That's 317. It was never
So
320.
2017, it was 280,700?
280,700.
Okay, and then
In 2018 it was 317,281. 2019 it was 343,650.
Okay.
That was with the other route.
What fiscal year was it that we paid for a portion of that D'Iberville route?
It was this fiscal
Last
year.
year.
This fiscal year.
Well,
The
no.
first half of
The
this
first,
fiscal
the
year.
first half of the year, we paid for a route that went, I think, to maybe Gay Road or something like that, Rolling Hills Trailer Park, something like that. Was that part of 1819?
That was part of 1819, or what I'm calling 19.
Okay. And so in the second half of the year, that wasn't a different budget that we came back in D'Iberville? That wasn't 2 fiscal years that were separate? Because I thought that we tried that for 6 months, and then did we come back in the middle of the year and do an amendment to our budget to add the additional part that D'Iberville and them do an amendment as well? I thought that was 2 different budget years that was done.
Yeah, I'm talking about
We-
how much was paid,
we-
not
we-
Yeah,
the
I
rich
understand
budget.
that, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started the route, we ran it for 6 months, and then you subsidize it on a demonstration basis. And then CTA carried it for about 4 or 5 months while we were discussing with you all in the city. and
So then-
D'Iberville, modifying it, adding D'Iberville, you're absolutely right. And then in November of this fiscal year, Thanksgiving weekend, we started the 6-month demonstration project with the new expanded route. So you're right. We did run the route over 2 separate fiscal years.
Okay, so my
Yes, sir.
question is, from 2017 to 2018, which that would be 17, 18, 18, 19, correct? We jumped $37,000, 36,500, something around there. A portion of that 36,500 was the increase in that route from D'Iberville. So the base was not 317 until we added that D'Iberville route to that. Then we come back and added an additional amount with a match from D'Iberville to get to the 343. Because that was spread over 2 fiscal years. So if that's the case, that 2017 number was increased, but that increase included what we put on that D'Iberville route. because that was over 2 fiscal years, because I remember discussing this at two different times we had budget workshops, and this wasn't, and D'Iberville at the same time, because I remember having this conversation with some of the council members in D'Iberville. So that 28700 to 3017 included the portion that we paid for that part of that route in D'Iberville. Then when it was expanded, we paid an additional amount. Does that make sense?
That's what happened. It was a
I
6-month
don't
deal.
have the prior
The
year.
numbers I have are not the budget numbers, they're the amounts that we paid, meaning the revised budget numbers that we
So,
paid for
yeah.
the year.
It was over 2 fiscal years, but what my point being, when we jumped from 28700 to 3017 281, I'm not saying all of it, but a portion of that included that partial D'Iberville route that was added.
You would be correct, and that 317 includes however many months in fiscal year 18 that we did the route.
Okay, and then
Part
in
of a year.
fiscal year 18, we went from 18 to 18 and 19, we went to 343, and that was the $26,400 approximately increase that was added to
For the
do
route.
the additional route with whatever match D'Iberville matched there. So with that route disappearing, it should be more than just a $23,000 difference. The difference should also include what we had in that jump for that route from 280 to 317. And I'm not trying to pick everything to death, but I mean, we have a $59,500 projected revenue, and we're wanting to spend $63,500,000. And so we have to start looking at some areas to cut back to get this number closer. And if it's the case that that route is completely going away and it's more than just that $23,000 we were paying for that route, which I'm pretty sure it is. I think the total for that route was $70-something thousand.
$36,000 from us.
Yeah, but the
$36,000
whole,
from
yeah,
us,
so the whole thing was $60,000 to $70,000, I believe, was the cost of that route.
I do not, I apologize, I don't have that 2018 specific data. I'd be happy to get it. I just didn't bring that budget request information with me.
And I'm not trying to be difficult, we have a $4 million difference in what we're wanting to spend and what our projected revenue is. I think it's fiscally irresponsible for us to, we're looking, the police department have requests and we cut back their requests. The fire department have requests and we cut their requests back. To me, that's the two most important departments in the city, because that's the public safety, that's the safety of our citizens. And if we're gonna cut them and the things that they need because there's not enough revenue there, we have to look at every request that comes in. And this isn't just your department that we're looking at with this, but we have to look and see what we can do. I think we have a responsibility to the residents of this city to see what we can do to bring those two numbers closer together.
I'll get that.
So, I mean, if we can, we don't have to make a decision on that today. We can pull those numbers from 2017-18 and then 18-19. We do have it?
Yep. In 20, remember, there are two numbers we're talking about. One is the number that's budgeted, the other is the number is how much we actually spent. So in 2017, we budgeted $280,700 and spent $280,700. In 2018, we budgeted 331, and we spent 317,281.
So we cut 1,000 off of what I mean?
We just didn't, we
didn't spend 1,000 of what we
paid what
budgeted.
we paid what we were invoiced, and that's how much we were
Okay.
invoiced. Because that route that route started out, I mean, we budgeted we budgeted 318 and we ended up getting invoiced 317. And then this current year, we budgeted 343. We ended up, we haven't, well, the year's not over yet.
But my question is, going back to that 17-18 year budget, when we jumped from 280 to 317, how much of that D'Iberville route encompassed that $40,000 or $37,000 difference? And that's $37,500. If I remember correctly, that $37,500 that we added, It was originally a $75,000 route. D'Iberville wouldn't come to the table, and so we said, we're gonna spend $37.5, which is half of it. What can we get? So if that route goes away completely, we have bigger than a $13,000 difference. We have a $50,000 difference between what we added for that route and that $13,000. The $13,000 was just an addition to what we had to Gay Road to extend that all the way to the promenade, and then adding what D'Iberville put into there.
I can't speak on that. I don't have that in front of me. Again, I apologize.
That's okay. I mean, we
anticipate
can-
everything y'all would ask, and I didn't.
Yeah, it was 37.5. We budget, it was 75,000 asked.
That was the purpose.
75,000
Yeah, I
asked,
mean,
and we
that-
budgeted, I mean, if you look at that number, that 280 to 317 is about $35,000. And so we budgeted additional 35,000, I believe, or 34.5 or something along that, or maybe 37.5. Yeah, it was 37,500, which was half of that route. To run that route for 6 months is what we did. So, and we can come back and look at it. You know, I just want to point that out. It's more than the 13,000 that it's showing. It includes the other portion of what we budgeted for that route the previous year. And so by losing that route, I mean, you're actually going back to our 2017 services and asking for an additional $50,000 is basically what we're doing with the 333 ask. That's 53,000 above the 280,700 that we had with the same services we'll be getting for 333,000.
I'm not sure that's the case, but I can't, like I said, I didn't.
Yeah, and I have our notes from those workshops somewhere. I'll just have to pull them. I have all the sheets from the workshops, but I'm almost positive it was
I'll give you-
37,500 that we added for 18-19, and then we added an additional 23 or whatever on top of that to the 19 or the 18-19 budget, 19-20 budget. No,
But you're right, the base should always be the 280.
yeah, the
That's what the base-
280,700 is where we were prior to that.
And then the route went away, so, you know,
Yeah.
we added that 30-something thousand strictly to run that route.
Kevin,
That was the main reason for that.
has there been any change in the subsidies that are helping to reduce our costs? In other words, has the county cut back on their subsidy?
No.
The county subsidy is 55,000 for,
Now you can walk out.
I mean, for the whole business or just for Biloxi?
No,
For the-
it's spread for Biloxi, Gulfport. Biloxi and Gulfport.
Right. So no increase in the county subsidy?
No, they won't increase it. It's been the same, like 15 years, the county subsidy. I'll go back and look at the detailed 2018 budget request and see how the Route 32 came into play on that. Like I said, I just can't recall from memory, and I didn't.
How would the council like to resolve this?
I guess we'll go back through our notes and see if we want to make, you know, we have time to make a decision if we want to allow the ask or cut it. But, you know, I think that we need to at least review going back the two last budgets and see exactly what those increases were. And like I said, I know that Mr. Tisdale keeps all his notes, so
For a price, I can share.
and I'm pretty sure that I have mine as well, going back to, you know, to what that increase was. But I'm almost positive the 280 to the 317 ask was that 37,500 to add that portion of the route. Then we added the additional last year when D'Iberville come to the table with money.
Your difference between 2017 to 2018 was 36,581. I believe that was the
Route.
D'Iberville portion. Then, when we came to budget, we did not, there's no resolutions that's been amended this. These were all adopted numbers. from 318 to this year's 25,319. I think that 25,000 was for the West Biloxi route. Did we not add a new West Biloxi route by the Walmart? But it's changed, two different numbers, 36,581 and 25,319.
So that's a total of $60,000. How much did DeIberville give last year for that additional
Said
Pops
20
Ferry route?
Yes.
I
think they matched us.
11,000,
Jody, what was that second number? The 36,580 was the first one we added to it.
Yeah.
That's how we got to 317. The
That's
base is
the-
always
that's the way we-
280.
That's the way we got to 318, was budget numbers, okay? That's 36,581
Right.
from 2017 to 2018. That's budget years, okay? From 2018 to 2019, where we're sitting right now, the difference is from last year's 25,319.
So that's a total of 60-something, 1,000.
It's probably a total, but I think it's two different events.
Yeah, so, but we can go back and look to see why we had those increases. We have that
Sure.
information as to why we had the increases. And so if a portion of that is my point being is we're losing the entire DeIberville route because it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. And I don't believe that we should continue to pay an absorbent amount for a route that we're not going to have, and that's basically what we're doing, the amount that we're paying. And I understand, that you have increases. We have a 2% increase for over 600 employees that we have to absorb as well, going into PERS. And, insurance increases for us as well, just like it does for you. And so I think we have a responsibility to look at every line on this budget and make the needed cuts. Like I said, we have a $4 million difference in what we're going to spend or what we're needing to spend if everything that is asked for is given versus what our projected revenue is. And a $4 million gap is a big gap. And we have to answer to our constituents as to how we're spending this money. And so, I just want to get that information and make sure that we're not giving money that was allocated to a route that no longer exists.
I don't think that's the case, but I'll get with your staff and
Okay.
we'll verify that.
All right.
I have all the information, just like you do with all the different, I give you a base budget and then some proposals and, with some options, and so I just can't recall from memory. And
Okay, that's
I
fine.
have it in front of me.
Uh,
We'll verify all
Yeah.
that.
Kevin,
Yes,
let me
sir.
ask you a question. The 25,000, when you come back there, what was the 25,000 for? Is that when Dalville pulled up all completely? Why did you come back and ask during the middle of the year for 25,000? We already did a 36.
That was cost sharing the 6-month demonstration project with DeIberville, the 25, whatever, the exact number was for 6 months.
That's what that was, and that's
Because we
not.
did it for 6 months, and then CTA carried it for 5 or 6 months while we were talking with you all about potentially doing something different this fiscal year. And like I said, Mr. Lawrence, I didn't bring that older info.
Yeah, but I know it's
I've got,
roughly 63,000 total.
I tried to anticipate all the questions you might ask, but
Yeah.
I didn't go that far back. I got
Yeah.
this year and next year's.
I mean, that's why I suggest that we just go back to the base of 280 and we go from there. Something happens just like during the year, something happens bad, then we have to change it. But, I mean, it's like Nathan saying, we got $4 million we're looking at somewhere. Somebody got to give up something sooner or later. Because you get the 800,000 for sure coming, 2%, and you have certain fire equipment I think you have to buy or put on the books this year. So there's certain things that we have to do to make sure we run in the city right.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank you
get-
all.
We'll get,
right.
we'll get back to you.
Well, I didn't have anything.
Oh.
I wanted to, I had a question or two, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I'm looking at your maps, they're a little hard to read, so if you can get something a little bit clearer that they haven't read. Right now, we have no connectors to DeIberville at all. They go from Biloxi to DeIberville.
There's a DeIberville route that they fund.
That
That comes into,
D'Iberville,
yes, sir, that comes into the Biloxi Transit Center. Yes, sir.
and it comes into Biloxi Station.
Yes, sir.
Does that go from, does it go over the I-110 bridge?
Yes, sir.
Or which way does it go? I-110 bridge?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay,
To the
that's,
promenade? To the promenade?
I'm sorry.
Is that where it goes to the promenade?
Yeah.
Oh, that's where that,
It serves part of St. Martin as well, too. Comes up Lemoyne Boulevard and Big Ridge and serves the residential area, and then it goes to Lakeview and the Promenade and down by City Hall and the library, and then comes into Biloxi.
okay. And the other thing was, I can't remember the route number, the one that used to go down Division Street,
31, the old
Route
31.
31, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I know that, we're looking at another project coming in on, maybe, 60-something units coming, which will be right off Division Street, and the possibility of, looking at that route coming back down Division Street. Probably not now, but if you can work something up, to give us maybe 6 months out from now to the end of the year, maybe trying to implement that maybe right around Christmas or right after, or just the holiday schedule. I don't know. But
Yeah, I'd
if
be
you-
happy to do that. I'd be happy to give you a proposal on that. I gave you a proposal 2 years ago on that. You asked for that 31, so I'll update that and get that to you.
Right.
Be happy
That-
to do that.
That's one of the routes that I get a lot of questions about, Route 31 coming back.
We do, too.
A lot of them miss that route.
We
So-
do, too.
So just while you're figuring that in, if you don't mind, just kind of
Yes,
looking
sir.
into that for me. Okay, that concludes my questions.
Anyone else have questions?
I don't, we already did it, I mean, that's up to Robert if you want to ask a question.
Robert's the only one.
Right, I apologize. I had this on my calendar for 3 o'clock today, and Michelle made me aware that at the last minute, we changed it back to 1:30. Apparently, my calendar didn't get that update, so I apologize for being late. Paula has briefly filled me in on the basis of the discussion right now, and I'll look at the numbers, so I don't have a lot of comments to make, with the exception of what I walked into when you discussed the routes to D'Iberville. While there is one route that connects Biloxi and D'Iberville, the problem with that route is people on the west side of Biloxi sit on a bus for 2 hours to get to a promenade, and that's it's way too cumbersome. But right, that it disincentivizes anybody from the east side of Biloxi to get on a bus. West side of Biloxi to get on a bus to get to D'Iberville. It almost impairs them to the extent that they can't participate in that type of retail or medical involvement. And so that was one of the things we added the route to, which is what brought the budget up from 17 to 18. And I would have to go back to all of my notes from last year to see why it went from 317 to 343 or whatever it did. And he's made me aware that you're not familiar to answer that question, or you're not prepared to answer that question either right now. And I guess we're going to get some answers before we really make some decisions on this. If you would, Kevin, I know you have my email. Would you forward that to me so I could review it? This is one of the things that I'm the one in the last meeting that requested that we hold off on discussions because I wanted to talk to you about that. Okay. So if you would, send them over to me so I can review them. I still have all my notes from last year. I'll review those as well. And then, of course, the council will be apprised of all of that. I don't have anything further because I'm walked into something and I don't want to make people restate what they've already said. I'll watch this feed and come back when we return with any questions that I have regarding the public transportation or the CTA. Thank you, Mr. President.
Madam President?
Anything else?
If we're done with Kevin, it sounds like we're done with Kevin. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to provide council the facts. The facts we know. The facts are, what we budgeted and then what we spent in each of those last 4 years. I can provide those to you. I'll email it all that to you.
That's yours.
As to what subsidy, remember that this is the way we get to the bottom line with CTA is he sums up his cost for whatever the routes are that we're going to have. He then subtracts the subsidies, various subsidies, county subsidies, advertising subsidies, so forth, and comes up to a figure that's the delta between his cost and subsidies, and that's the amount that we're charged for that route. So it seems to me that if we don't want to pay that amount, the only option CTA has is to amend somehow the scheduled routes to reduce the cost.
By the way, Kevin, I don't think Robert and I received this packet.
Do you have them with you, or are they in our box?
Sorry about
Okay.
that.
One question, Kevin. I know I said I was done, and you may have addressed this. If you have addressed this, just let me so you don't have to address it again. Have you talked with D'Iberville? I know D'Iberville contributed for the route, I think it's 32, that was connecting Biloxi and the Promenade directly, or D'Iberville, but for the purpose of getting our ridership into the Promenade area primarily. Have you talked to them? What's going on with their budgeting for that route? Is there any discussion with that city?
It's strictly based on my recommendation. And I shared the ridership information with Clay and told him because of the low ridership and it wasn't growing, my recommendation was to terminate it. It grew from like 2.8, the first demonstration project, to like 3.4 per hour during the second demonstration project. I mean, I'm like everybody else. It seems to me like, the community was asking for it, that they would use it more than they did, but, there's some factors come into play, like the college closed, kind of like overnight kind of thing. Some of those people were using it. So, you never know when you put those routes out there whether there's going to be ridership or not, because the community sees it as a good thing, and their neighbors, they think their neighbors need it, and they know people that need it, but they don't need it, and we run into that a lot. So it's good that the community sees that it's a quality of life issue in their community to have public transit, but all of us being responsible with city tax dollars and federal tax dollars that we use, we have to have ridership to sustain those routes, and it just was not growing.
Well, it did grow. It just didn't grow to the rate that you're happy. And we only had 2 trial runs. In that second trial run, we had some concerns with the public of it shutting down, so they started making alternate plans or different things. But growth is still growth. It did grow.
It did.
With regard to whether it did grow, have you taken into consideration the chance that it may continue to grow and reach that ridership? With any business, you look at what your growth potential is, and you look at what your advertising is, and your public awareness of the product, then your public need of the product. And so right now, we do have a growth in ridership. Do we have enough public awareness to say that it's not worth improving the quality of life for our residents? That public knowledge is more important than the service itself, because if they're not aware of the service, they can't use the service. So what have we done to really apprise the public in that area of the service itself? And would that help to increase the ridership if we made the public more aware, or we give them more time to be aware of that route?
We have a marketing department, a person that does marketing, and we put more time, money, and effort into that route than we have any other route. A lot of media coverage, a lot of meetings with tenants and buildings and visits at businesses, and where we're going in and meeting with apartment complexes and meeting with tenants and giving them some free passes to get them to come out and try the service.
And so within the matter of one more term, which is what, 6 months? Is that what you're referring to as a term? What's
The last term was 6 months.
So
yes.
6 months, we've seen a 33% increase in ridership in 6 months. Is it fair to say that wouldn't continue, that trend wouldn't continue?
It flattened out at the end of the 6-month period, so I don't see it.
We had the 6 months period, and then you extended it.
We had
Right, well, 6 months, we had a 2.8 ridership. These are your numbers, the
Right.
2.8 ridership.
Right, that's correct.
And then it went up to 3 point something. So we're talking about a 30 to 33% increase in ridership in a matter of 6 months. So I don't know if that justifies saying that it will or it won't. Now, keep in mind, it's going to go flat at the end of 6 months because there was already some public knowledge that this route was going to terminate and cancel. So the public perceiving that it's going to terminate or cancel would flatten out that ridership growth. It would stop growing.
We didn't make any announcements to the
Well, I
public
got
that we were going
calls.
to terminate that until I talked with the city and the 2 cities about it. We were very careful about that.
But you're looking at 7 riders per hour, I think, was your standard.
Yes.
And even then, with that route, as long as we carried that, you only got half of that
Right.
in a good week, more or less. I just don't know that the demand is there. I mean, I'm all for it. I know a lot of senior citizens that if you don't drive, how do you get out of your house and socialize and get from one place to another if you don't have a support system here? But basically, you'd love to do it if you could afford it. We just can't afford it.
It's only,
Well,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, are you done?
No, I'm done.
In economically speaking, there's a difference between demand and quantity demanded. And so the demand is derived based off a lot of things. And so the quantity demanded is something that we determine once we know that there is a demand or isn't a demand. Then we can determine how much of that quantity is actually going to use whatever product or service we're advertising, selling, or promoting. And so I don't think within a year and 2 trial runs, when we've seen an increase of 30 to 33%, we can actually say we have a good foundation of what that quantity demanded is. Because I don't think the market, the test market, which is people in that route, are even aware that this route exists yet. I think we have done a good job of advertising. I think you guys have spent the money and time in advertising. But when it comes down to making it available and accessible, I think 1 year isn't enough to say that the public is fully informed and aware of this product that hasn't been there for their entire life. It's never existed. So they've never counted on it. They've made other provisions. And when we see a 30% or a 30-something% increase in growth in 6 months, I think that's a positive indicator that there is a need and that may continue to grow. But obviously, I'm representing the people in my ward and in my district that want stuff like this and are the ones that use it. When we look at the bottom line and the numbers outside of the realm of my ward and the people in my ward that want this route, I get the point. I understand it. But when we look at quality of life in a city, I think we have to consider that the numbers fiscally could be there and the indicators are there possibly, and that we have to look at other quantitative information to really determine if this is fair to cancel or should we move it forward. I want to see the justification for the increase in the thing. I'm waiting for that, but I think we also need to have a serious and a fair conversation of what Route 32 means to our city as a whole, our budget as well, and the people of my ward and Kenny's ward. And I don't know if it touches any of Councilman Barrett's ward, but I think that those wards, the people in those wards should really be given consideration, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, are we asking CTA to give us a proposal to add back Route 32 with or without D'Iberville?
Well, I think if we look at the budget and we see those numbers, and if those numbers aren't decreased, but we increase the budget to add that route, then we really have to ask ourselves, why is the budget not decreased if we're removing that route? And if so, then if the money's built into that route, so I need to know what's going on with the budget to really make that answer, because we don't know if the budget has given consideration to that route or not. And if it hasn't, then it's a pretty substantial increase in the budget if we're decreasing a route. So I'll look forward to those numbers, and we can actually have that discussion when we have those numbers. If that's fair, Mike.
Well, we have the numbers.
Well, no, we do have the numbers, but we don't have, he's not prepared to tell us why the number has increased $60-something thousand from 2018. We know why it went up from 2018 to 2019. It was to add this route. It was in consideration of this route. So if this route is gone, why is it up $68,000 from where it was in 2018? That's what we need to know. We have numbers, but what justifies those numbers, and what support do you have for those numbers? So that's what we need to see before we can have a fair conversation about what needs to happen with the routes.
So Kevin, that really, what we're talking about is the difference between 2017 and 2019,
I understand.
as opposed to 18 to 19.
I have all that
Okay.
detailed data with me today. I didn't anticipate that. I'm sorry. I tried to anticipate everything you would talk about. I failed on that one.
Look, there was definitely a breakdown
But
in communication.
again, I don't.
Because I didn't even know it was 1:30 today.
I don't believe it's a situation where we ask for additional money to operate the route and then ask for more money again to operate the same route. I don't think that's the case, but I'll give you the detail. You know, the documents that I submitted to the city, I'll go back and get those out and provide those to y'all.
Thank you, Kevin, and I actually don't have any more this time.
I'm gonna ask you a question. The
And make
route
sure to
from
get us those
Dialville
packets.
that we getting rid of or went away, it went from Dialville to where?
I'm sorry.
The Route 32 that went away,
I'm sorry, I didn't.
It went from Dialville and to where?
It started at Pass Road. It connected with Route 34 Pass Road, and then it went up Pops Ferry, and then went out to the promenade area, served all of the ridership generators on Pops Ferry Road, and turned around and come back. It was a 90-minute route.
So that, we never brought anybody to the Edgewater Mall or downtown Biloxi.
that's another route. That's Route 34, right? I mean, Route
Yeah, I'm talking about,
34.
what did the Dialville never, all they did was take our people, brought them to the promenade. What did we get out of it?
Your folks,
I'm talking about Edgewater Mall, where our shopping is.
Well, we have a route that serves the mall.
it connects with Route 34 Pass Road, which runs on Pass Road from Biloxi to Gulfport. So they had access, people that were on Pops Ferry Road could get on Route 34 and make the connection and go anywhere in Biloxi.
But the Dialville was mainly coming here to take our people and bring them to promenade. It looked like we send more people to Dialville.
Yeah,
And we paying that kind of money and we send them to the Dialville.
Well, George, that's why I went to the D'Iberville Council and talked to the Clay and the council members over there, and that's what got them on board. They understand that. They know that it's a definite benefit for their businesses and their community, and they got on board. I mean, am I right? That's what got them on board. So we all agree and understand. It increases the quality of our citizens' life and opportunity to access to retail and healthcare, and we know that. But they know it as well, that it's a benefit to their businesses and their bottom line. They got on board and they were 50-50 with us in this last run.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what you wasn't here. It was 36.5 and it was 25. That's how you got to the money we got, the 63,000 more.
Well, if I'm tracking, I think we've got two questions. One is to explain the increase in the base ridership of the existing routes between 2017 and 2019, and then this year. And also the question of, if we were to reinstitute Route 32, would D'Iberville contribute to that? And if not, how much would it be for us to have Route 32?
Well,
Do you have
So
those
it's sort of
packets?
two competing
Do
questions
you have
there.
those packets with you, by the way?
Excuse me?
The packets that you passed out to the council, with the exception of us, because we were sorry.
they didn't get one.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
I need to give a proposal on Route 31.
Thirty-
Reestablishing the old Route 31.
Just the Division Street.
Division,
Right.
Howard Avenue.
Okay. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. We're done
And
with
I'd like to bring up now Miss Jeannie Herron to talk to you about CASA.
Come on up, Miss Jeannie.
Yeah,
Don't you look cute?
at least, yeah.
3 minutes.
Well, this is a hot seat.
And it is, and it's still have, and to remind them just what CASA is, they should know.
Yes. I'm Jeannie Herron. I'm the Executive Director for CASA of Harrison County, and thank you so much for funding help funding our organization since 2011. We are a small not-for-profit 501c3 located here in Harrison County. All of the funding that funds our program comes from companies, foundations, and individuals right here in Harrison County. Our mission is, our sole mission, the only mission that we have is to recruit, train, and support volunteers to advocate for neglected and abused children. Last year, at the end of last year, 2018, there were 825 children right here in Harrison County that were in CPS legal custody. When we term legal custody, that means that the state has these children in their ward, okay? That's not counting all of the in-home cases and monitor cases. Have you guys heard of the Families First Act from the federal government? No? Anyway, what that means is that they're trying to get more children to stay in the home and bombard the home with services. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but who's going to monitor it? In 2018, CASA of Harrison County advocated for $200 134 children. How many children right here in Biloxi? Last year, we advocated for 46 children right here with the address of Biloxi. They go to school here, they live here, they play here, and we advocated for them. How did we advocate for them? Well, we trained community volunteers to go into the home. Can you imagine volunteers going into a home, not knowing where the home is, not knowing who's going to be there, to make sure that that home is safe for the child? They go to all IEP meetings. They contact the schools to make sure that the kids are compliant, that they are going to school. Because you see, some of these folks that we work with, the parents, you know, they weren't raised in dysfunctionality. How many of us were born learning how to parent? Absolutely none of us. I was not. It's a learned behavior, okay? And so it takes all of us. When I grew up in a small little town in Illinois, the neighbors, the Sunday school teacher, my first grade teacher, they all knew my business. They knew when I was good, they knew when I was bad. And believe you me, they told my parents, right? Well, a lot of our folks, parents that we work with, they have never had a support system. Instead of blaming them, we walk alongside of them. We help them. It's little things to form positiveness. You've done a great job. Your house looks nice. Oh, I'm so glad that you're getting your kids up for school. I'm so glad that your kids have not been tardy. When you praise people and help them learn how to parent, they become better parents. 235 children last year that we advocated for, 43 right here in Biloxi. We are asking for Biloxi support of $5,000 to help support our program to advocate for neglected and abused children right here in Biloxi. Do I have more time?
This was the same amount that we gave last year.
Yes, we're not increasing it. Our budget, we're a small not-for-profit, and we have 42 volunteers. We have 2 office staff. So we get a lot done with last year's budget. Our operating budget was $122,000. So we do a lot of work with 2 staff members and 40 volunteers, and we advocated for 235 children here in Harrison County.
Do you get financial help from other cities?
I'm sorry?
Do you get financial help from other cities?
We do. Harrison County Board of Supervisors give us a lot of funding. We receive the same amount of funding from City of Gulfport, $5,000. We receive, Pass Christian funded us. We receive a lot of money from Hancock Bank and all of the other, the banks. So we're 100% community funded, Harrison County funded. We've never received federal grants, state grants, and so we kind of run a tight fiscal ship at our organization.
Thank you.
So $5,000, roughly 43 children. I think that comes to about $116 this past year, $116 per child to have somebody.
Right.
Would guardian angel be too strong a term to use instead of a CASA volunteer? They seem to wear a lot of hats. They've got to be the parent, the fairy godmother. They have to be the counselor, everything.
Well, can you imagine saying, I'm going to volunteer for an organization? First of all, you have to go through 30 hours of intense training before you can even become a CASA advocate. You have to be sworn in by Judge Dickinson and take an oath of confidentiality. You have to go to home visits, and if the child is in placement in the home, you have to go to their home. If they're not, you have to go to the foster home. You have to work with all the community, churches, the schools. We even have to get, police records.
That sounds like a guardian angel to me. Anyway, I think it's a good expenditure of funds. I could support a $5,000 contribution.
Thank you so much.
And you have to talk above councilman.
Any other questions, council?
Is that it?
Yep. Thank you, Jeannie.
Oh, thank you.
I assume there. Let me address 2 other non-department requests that have come in. One of those requests is for the Center for Nonviolence. Ms. Stacy Riley sent us a letter requesting $25,000 for the Center for Nonviolence. Nobody here, that letter just came in, so if, I'll try and get her to another.
How much did you say?
25,000.
Is that something that we,
No, there's, I was looking through the CDBG, the project appropriations and everything. I think there's $10,000 set aside for them, as I recall. I think that might have been the case last year, but we just received, at least I received a letter, I'm assuming you all received a letter,
Yes.
maybe in your mailbox,
Chief,
I did.
with a
don't they-
request for $25,000 that came in just the past several days.
now, did we give to that last year or no?
We did not,
Okay.
other than the CBDG money.
What's that? That's all you.
Chief Miller, Chief, don't they help you guys out a whole lot? And that was one of the reasons why I've always pushed for them, because I think, Chief, could you give us a little bit about how the benefits of Center for Nonviolence helping out the police department?
Sure, it's not at all a rarity for us to have to take action in a family dispute or where a husband and wife are having problems. We have to separate them a lot of times, and much of the time we have to find a place to take them. The Center for Nonviolence will allow us to do that with women and kids. They've even taken males for us before. And then through a domestic situation where there's a divorce involved, they've been pretty instrumental in helping us keep the peace between the families while that's going on.
Yes.
I know I've come in contact with several women that I've dropped off at the center myself.
Yeah, and they help us out a lot.
They do. They
Especially,
even offer some training throughout the year that we usually attend.
absolutely. So I think it's worthwhile, big time.
We do fund them though, don't we?
So,
We fund them through the CDBG.
if we
money.
fund through, at a rate of $10,000 from CBDG money, so this would be an additional request of 15.
Well, can you get it out of CDBG money?
If
Well,
we,
that's what that money's for.
well, that money's for,
Yeah, whatever.
site it's for.
Whatever the allocation is, you can spend up to 15%,
Mm-hmm.
basically, I think, for services, or support services, things of that nature. And I'm thinking in the past, I can't remember the figures right off the top of my head, but it was 10,000 for the Center for Nonviolence. I think more community
Community
center,
Center.
I think was 25,000. I think it totaled 65,000 total. There were 3 or 4 entities that
Three, yeah.
that received something. Now, Back Bay Mission, that flows, any contributions there flows through Mr. Creel's office, as I recall. So you can't expend more than 15%. I don't know. I want to say it was $60,000 total in this last program year appropriation for CDBG. Didn't we approve that at the last council
You
meeting?
did, and it's my understanding that we go to the max that we're allowed to do for those community
Well,
grants, but I don't have those numbers in front of me.
you can't do more than 15%. You can do less than 15%, or maybe it's yeah. Anyway, since it's the last year, 2019 is the last year of a 5-year program, there's no carryover money, so I think if Susan Pickett was here, she'd tell you that they've appropriated and allocated every dime that they have available. Again, this is the last year in a 5-year cycle, because you have to present a 5-year plan and then revise that or tweak it every year annually. That's why they have the public hearings and so forth. So I don't think there's any money left based on what we approved at the last council meeting for anything else to come from CDBG, I think.
Unless we submitted a revised plan to HUD. Right now, our action plan for this next year has been submitted, and it's got
Right.
those three community grants in there, including the $10,000 for Center for Nonviolence. So in this, unless we submitted a revised plan to Jackson, to HUD in Jackson.
Yeah, that's true. You
10
can't.
grand is locked in.
Right. You could. I'm not an expert on all this stuff. All I know is what I picked up in dealing with these, and educating myself. There's always a possibility for a budget amendment that may or may not be approved through up and down the ladder from the feds and through Jackson.
This is the Center for Nonviolence, yeah.
It's like you said though, Paul, it's 15%, but it's 15% of $1 million something. So you got enough, you got more than any $50,000, $60,000 you can play with.
I want to say you get an allocation from the feds, and then you have program funds that are generated locally. And whatever that figure is, for some reason, I want to say it's 640,000, 620,000 something. You can use 15% of that, and up to 15% of that. And I think what they've used, I want to say, is 10 or 12%, as I recall. I think it totaled 60 among those 3 or 4 organizations.
I mean, that's one of the purpose of the CDBG money. You're supposed to support groups like that. So, I mean, that's what you have to look at. Instead of putting it somewhere else, you do what you got to do, you know?
Well, that's why you
And I don't
go.
think there's any law saying you got to do stick 15%.
No, but that's why it comes to the council for approval, and we just approved all this last week. It'd been great if this was on last week's budget workshop, but it's not. It's on today's workshop. So
Well,
that's where we are.
I'll resend the page out of the action plan that's got the amount that we have set aside for the Center for Nonviolence. I was handed a note as we were talking about how much we paid, how much we gave to the Center for Nonviolence in the past, and it's been as high as $120,000 back in fiscal year '07. And as recently as fiscal year '12, we were giving them $33,000.
2007 might have been the zenith of charitable giving from the city.
Yeah.
I think that might have been the year the city doled out to non-departmentals about 1.7 or 1.8. Yeah, I can't say it, millions. Those were the good old days, and in fact, I don't know, the fund balance might have had 60, 70 million in it.
That would happen at Katrina.
Until George spent it
That
all.
took care of $1 million we used to give away. Katrina did that. That's when we stopped all that.
Okay, so where we're leaving this, it seems to me, is we're leaving this as a proposal that they receive a total of $25,000, of which 10 is already locked in.
I think it's
through the
worthy
center-
to leave it
center-
there, and
through the
like you were
CBDG,
saying.
and then the rest would be depending on what we decide to put in this non-department budget.
Absolutely, because if you look at community development block grant money, we already have a lot allocated there already. So with that being said, we put this in here for that purpose. Community development block grant money is already, chipped away at a whole lot. And again, just like you said, we still have to fund those things that we have in our action plan. And we have to stay within the rules of what we already have.
What you need to do is make sure you put in line next year, give them the $25,000 in CDBG money.
But next year, we get a chance to redo that.
That's what I'm saying, but make sure you got to remember to do that.
We can shape it
Up to
in that form,
25.
but right now, we still have to go along with the plan we already have set forth.
Well, how about I'll send you the CBDG, the page out of that action plan that we just approved, so you can see those numbers, and I'll poll each of you as to what you might propose to add, if you propose to add anything to that or not.
Yeah, but
I
this
have-
year, we can't get out the scope of what we already have, to my understanding.
Right. I have one other additional request that came in during the week, and that is the Harrison County Soil and Water Conservation District asked us for $15,000. I'm not totally familiar on what the Soil and Water Conservation District does, but we had not given them money last year. We gave them $15,000 a year before that. I think that's the only time I remember that request in my time here. So we didn't give them any money at all last year. So
That's another $50,000 we don't have.
so I would propose that we leave it the same as last year and say, and decline to put anything in that bucket.
So every time you start giving away a little bit of money, they're all going to line up again. And that's the reason we stopped it all once before, other than the ones we wanted to support, like the Back Bay Mission, the Moore Community House. That's why we stopped doing all that. That's how they run it up to $1 million, because they all kind of, y'all need $50,000, need $25,000, need $75,000, and they want you to cut it. Don't give them 50, give them 25, but that's more money we put out every time we do that. We need to cut here somewhere. We got $4 million we playing with.
That's what we told them, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with George, and I know this is stepping outside of the non-departmental, but, you know, I'm very uncomfortable approving a budget with a $4 million gap in it. I know that we're projecting the 8.3 surplus at the end of the year, and I know that a lot of this has already been looked at and some numbers have, you know, been agreed on, but I think, and, you know, this is obvious since day one for me on here. I think that, you know, there's a couple of departments that we have to take care of from top to bottom because it concerns our public safety. That's the police department, the fire department, and even our public works department, making sure that our roads are safe for our people to travel on, our ditches are cleaned out so that water doesn't back up into people's home and create unsafe driving conditions and things like that. But outside of that, I believe that everything's on the table to look at hitting some reductions because we have a responsibility. I mean, nobody in this room, I mean, we're talking, I don't know what $4 million of 63 million is, but it's about 6%. None of us are going to spend an absorbent amount above what we make in our regular lives, and I don't think that that it's the right thing to do with the taxpayers' money. I think that we have a responsibility to the taxpayers to be fiscally responsible, and I know that there's a lot of needs, but sometimes you have to do things that hurt to make things add up. And so I think that, you know, outside of, like I said, those 2 or 3 departments, I think we need to go back and start looking at, and you know, and I agree with what Paul said last week, or Dr. Tisdale, I'm sorry. You know, some of these things that we've given to in the past, we may have to, maybe not eliminate it, but cut back some. And I know that in the non-departmentals, just cutting back some doesn't make that meet. So we may have to look into some other areas to do that. And I know it may be an uncomfortable thing to discuss and might make some people unhappy. But like I said, we have a responsibility to the people that we represent to be good stewards of this money. And, you know, I just think that we might need to go back through here and look at everything and see where we can make some changes.
Councilman, I see 2 options if you really want to close that gap. One of them is layoffs. That's where all 70% of the money is. If we want to reduce some positions, that's one way to get to it. The second one is to increase the revenue, and the only way I know to do that on top of what we already have is to raise our tax rate. If you really want to close the gap, those 2 things that need to be done. We need to cut positions and increase our taxes. I don't think we can get there any other way.
Well, can I interject? So, cities aren't so much like private companies in the sense that we have to generate profits for dividend shares and returns. We're the same as them in the sense that we have directors that are supposed to fiscally manage and operate this company called the City of Biloxi. However, when we have money in the budget, a surplus, that money should be spent on the city. It shouldn't sit somewhere. It should be used so we don't have to raise taxes. So while we talk about raising the taxes to close this gap or laying off people, there's a lot of things we could do. For example, we have people that have, if we lose an employee, retirement or whatever, we have to pay out their
vacation.
Right, we have to pay that out. But what we do is we hire to replace that. What if they had 6 weeks or 8 weeks of earnings, why not wait till that's paid off so we don't double pay that amount?
That's an excellent idea, and it's something we do already. And is that we gap. In fact, if you would look at my desk, you'd see a pile of 8 hiring packages sitting on my desk right now that have been there for a week, that I'm waiting till it's been a month.
You in fact do that. Well, now what that means, particularly in the area of public safety, that means you've got an officer that's out on I don't know, we'll call it terminal leave because he's going to retire and he's got his leave built up, or whether it's a firefighter.
With all due respect, Paul, I
go
didn't bring
ahead.
that up to open the door to
Okay.
talk about that topic specifically. I'm just saying there are things that we can do to help reduce our exposure to cost. And if we have a surplus, before we start talking about raising taxes or laying off, we need to find other places, and there are plenty of other places we can trim the fat. There isn't just one way. We increased this, we had two of this portion, we raised a little bit because of PERS, something we can't control. That is absolutely something we're not going to be able to change or trim that fat. That's a legislative issue that comes from the powers above us. However, there are a lot of places we can. We didn't increase 6% of our budget just by PERS alone. We did it with the willful acts of this council and the administration. Those are the things we have to look at, the increased spending and the increased opportunities that we thought we were taking that were financial opportunities. There's plenty of things we can do to reduce our exposure to that increased cost. That's what we need to be looking at. We need to use the money that we have in surplus to help substitute and support our budget right now while we address reducing our spending so we can get our budget under control and back into shape where it matches what our revenues are. I agree from top to bottom. We have to protect certain departments that are important and requirements for public safety and for the maintaining of our city welfare structure, whatever infrastructure issues. But we have to do that responsibly. We can't just say because the fire department says we need X amount of dollars, we just give it to them blindly. We are all as studious and expeditious as possible when it comes to making sure that we're responsibly funding those departments. I think that we can. Now, I know I talked a long time about creating the engineering department. I know Chrissy's back there, and she probably hates to hear this, but there's a lot of expenditure. We broke off the engineering from the Public Works Department. That increased a lot of costs for the city. We doubled director pay, and we doubled space and other labor that we didn't have to do. It worked fine when they were together. That's just an example. Christy, I'm not suggesting that your position be terminated, but these are just suggestions that I'm looking at, that there are plenty of things we've done in the past 6 years that have exacerbated the spending of the city of Biloxi, and those are the things we need to rein in before we start talking about raising taxes on the people that live here, is reining in the spending and the duplicit nature of every aspect of municipal budgeting.
Well, I have a comment or two on that. As I drive around and look around the city, there's a lot of work that need to be done. So cutting workers is probably shouldn't be even come close to put on the table. We need to take care of our citizens, and that's what we're here to do. I understand what Robert was saying, but the bottom line is we got to find a way to take care of our citizens. Billy Ray is short out there. I'm looking every day as I ride through the neighborhoods. We're short on workers. We need to get back to beautifying our city. We need to get back to our manpower. That's what we need to do. Our critical workers, our essential workers, we need to make sure they are taken care of. So if we do any cutting, it'll have to come way up at the top, more so than way down at the bottom.
And I agree with that.
Let me interject. One, I never said cutting our employees. Never once said firing anybody or laying off anybody. However, there are creative solutions to that. For example, what you call was the Deming Plan or something we did with some public works, which helped, it reduced our costs on some of these things. There are we can create relationships with private companies that can do some of this job at a much lower cost than we do as a city. We just have to look for those opportunities and take advantage of them, like we did with cutting certain municipal properties. It saved us labor and time for Billy Ray's people, and we got it done at a smaller cost to the city. Those are the things. We have to be creative about how we accomplish this task. I'm not suggesting laying off anyone that helps us maintain the city or protect the city from fires or crime or anything. That's not my position. My position is being more effective about how we manage the money that we have, instead of telling because this is for our citizens. We have to do this for the citizens.
Absolutely.
Raising the taxes hurts the citizens, whether it's the independent business, whether it's the corporation, or whether it's just the mom and pop at home in their yard. It affects our citizens as a whole when we raise taxes. So that's what we have to do. We have to find those niche areas where we can save money and we can reduce it. And if we have to look at the top and start trimming from the top down, I'm all for that. I'm all for trimming. Let's start trimming as much as possible.
Most citizens that I talk to don't mind paying more on the taxes if they get something for it. And that's the bottom line. They don't mind paying long as they get if they get what they're paying for. And that's the biggest thing that I see out there today. People are not getting what they're paying for.
Well, with all due respect, they should get what they're paying for, and what they're paying for now is no different than what they would be paying for if they paid more money. The amount of money they're paying doesn't change the amount or quality of services they should be getting from the city. They've been paying taxes, and they should have been getting those taxes. We need to reduce what we do fiscally so those people can get those services that you're talking about. They're not getting them because we have been for far too long, and I'm not blaming your administration alone, I'm blaming this council and all the prior administrations. For far too long, we have been not responsible enough with what we've done with money coming in and going out. And I'm at fault just as much as everyone else is that's had any leadership. So that's something we have to grasp and we have to take ownership of.
And that's why I'm pushing manpower, because contracting is not going to solve it. We need our manpower back.
By raising taxes,
you have enough people in the city, employees, you gotta make sure the employees that we have are working. We got plenty of employees and plenty enough to do the job. And going back to all this money, we finished last year only spending 58 million. So why can't we do that again? How did we get to 58,050,000 last year? That's what we spent last year. Now you're talking about 64 million.
there are some unique one-time things this year that weren't there last year. There is a new fire station that we have to staff. That's 9 bodies. There are 2 fire trucks. That's the beginning of a long string of fire trucks we're going to have to buy over time. There's the replacement of 15-20% of our police vehicles that are worn out. I mean, there's some things that are hitting us for the first time. A fire station, two fire trucks and 9 firemen. That's not cheap. And the only way to reduce fire costs is to close a fire station, which will drive our insurance rates up.
Okay, so what about taking that bond and taking some of the mayor's wants off that bond and subsidizing the fire station for some of these one-time costs? If it's not a reoccurring cost that we're going to face down the road every single year, then the bond is appropriate for that, and that's what we should use. We should be paying with money that we have now for things that we need now, as long as it's not a residual expenditure. If we're using the bond to pay for something that we're going to have to try to cover every single year, no, that'd be irresponsible. But we have the bond already, and we have a bunch of wants on that. So maybe we need to redirect some of those wants to pay for needs that are one-time costs.
So
just a thought.
How much of that is truly one time though? Because I asked this last week, and the fire trucks, for instance, that's broke up into 7 years.
7 years.
So that's not that's a 7-time cost, and that's something that's going to be ongoing from what you just said. So once this rolls off, we're going to have to buy some more. And then the fire station, that's also financed through, I know one of the fire stations is paid for out of a previous, that $7 million bond, or a portion of it is, but that other fire station that we're bringing online, that's for how long that we have to pay for that?
15 years.
So that's not a one-time cost either. We're leasing that through SMPDD, lease to own basically through SMPDD.
But what's our annual cost for that?
Well, one of them's $160,000.
$350,000 a year for the fire station 7. That's
And
the
then-
15-year lease purchase
And then
agreement.
for the fire trucks, we're at like $160, right?
$160 for 7 years.
For 7 years. So those aren't one-time costs. And then the new employees that we have to hire for that is not one-time cost either.
Well, I didn't mean to say one time. What I guess I meant
just
to say was
additional to what we had last year.
this is something that was not in last year's, but
So, but the 160 and the 350 equals $500,000. Or
Right, we're talking about.
500. Yes.
Okay? Everything in this budget, if you look at the departmental summaries, the highest ones that are going up are the fire and police, because we are a service-oriented
Correct.
type of business. We've got 70% of this budget is people. So you don't have fat in the services and charges portion. If
Jody, I didn't mean to offend you, and I love you, but that's not the fat that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about independent positions that we're hiring. That stuff, the cost of a vehicle that we have to get, that's not fat. That's not the fat I'm talking about. This is a 60-something million dollar budget. That is de minimis in the grand scheme of the entire budget. There is tons of fat in other places besides what you're talking about. This is a $63 million budget that we have to look at as a whole. I'm not pinpointing one purchase or one position. I'm talking about it as an aggregate. Everything in it. There is tons. We didn't go from 58 to 64 because of one thing. We've gone because we are increasing top level positions. We're giving 10% raises to people. We're doing things like that we have to look at and trim back. We're creating department heads, which we did a few years ago. That's another $100,000. I mean, all this stuff adds up. It does. And so the term fat I use loosely, but I'm not referring to the fat that you were talking about. I'm talking about different things.
I mean, 10,000 here and 10,000 there adds up a lot. I mean, you have in 2 years, we increased CTA $50,000. And then you go to the library system. We gave them an additional $12,000 last year, and they're asking for an additional whatever thousand this year. And if you go and look, I mean, it's the city of Gulfport. Sure, they only have 2 libraries, but what is their population base that they service with those 2 libraries versus our population base? And what we give to them is almost double what the city of Gulfport is given to them. And so the reason they come and they ask us for these absorbent amounts of money is because we give it to them and the others don't. I mean, you look at Harrison County. It's the Harrison County library system inside Harrison County, and they're not giving them more this year. They're cutting their budget this year. And so, and we just, I think that we take the easy route too many times and just say yes to all these asks. I mean, we have a museum, and I know that this is touchy-feely, but we have a museum that's losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, yet we repeatedly give them an absorbent amount of money every year on an electrical. I mean, who spends $10,000 a month on electricity? And that's just, and you start adding those things up, and $10,000 and $15,000 here and there adds up to a lot of money. And so I think that we need to take a serious look, and I agree with you. I know that 70% of this is to personnel, and I'm not saying that we can close this whole amount, but there's some things that we can look at, and like Paul said, I know it's great and it draws a lot of people, but $10,000 just for an hour of fireworks, that's $10,000, and you start adding those things up, and it adds up to a whole lot.
Okay, well, I've been here a long time, so I'm gonna go ahead and I've studied many budget meetings, and it would be nice at these meetings if we could get general consensus, whether you want to add or you want to subtract. We've got to start making some kind of leeway, because right now, all we're doing is talking to one another, but we're not making any decisions for us to go one way or the other. So if you have any ideas about how to increase non-departmental, y'all get some general consensus going on, and me and the administration will start doing some massaging of the numbers for you.
Right, so here's the way my company works. Okay, and I have 4 different locations, and I have a manager in each one of them. And I look at the budget, and I say, here's what your budget is, figure it out. If you can't figure it out, I'll step in, or I'll bring someone else in that can. You have directors, give them a budget, figure it out. Get down, figure out how to get 10% down.
Okay. No,
Okay,
but
in
Councilman, you're right.
non-departmentals,
This is exactly what we've done, and we've done through 2 cycles of this. It's already a good bit down from what they asked for originally.
and that's great. That's positive direction. I mean, positive movement in the right direction. Great. Non-departmentals, I mean, George, we've cut back non-departmentals in the past few years extreme amounts. We've cut it way back to almost where that whole page says zeros now. We've stopped accepting applications or stopped giving money to groups. But he's right. We got to look at this. It's like Kevin comes in and asks for an increase or a decrease of 10,000 when he's just increased it 50 or 60,000 for a service that he's no longer providing anymore. That's the stuff we can't do that. And he's right when you look at the libraries. Those positions are things we have to look at them and say, I'm sorry. Go beat up Gulfport and go beat up the county. We're giving a disproportionate amount of money for the services provided to the entire county, and that's not right. I think that you're right, we don't have a consensus, and if the administration would ask us to put something together, I'd be happy to head a committee with Mr. Barrett if he'd be willing to look at non-departmentals and make a recommendation. It's a painful thing.
Can I ask a question?
I think we done got way off track here. We done got to going in a circle. We're the hamster on the wheel now. You know, we need to get back to the budget. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Nathan hit those points about the CTA. We hit it. We know what we need to do. Let's do it. Let's go ahead and go through. I understand what she was saying. Okay, if we don't want it, we need to go ahead and get the budget and go through it and say we don't want it.
Yeah.
But just getting on that hamster wheel and just going around, it's not getting us anywhere right now.
Well, that's why I just suggested forming a committee to address these non-departmentals, so we can just address it.
We got 2 weeks.
We put, just like we do with the insurance committee, create a committee to address the non-departmentals. That committee will make a recommendation to the rest of the council. We come to some kind of conclusion, we present that to the administration.
The only problem with that, with non-departmentals, you're gonna have people, and I'm not gonna name names, it's gonna be for one little thing here and one little thing there, and then they forget the others because they're all for that, and then so-and-so's for this and not that.
We bring in the revisions and we go through each one of them one more time, and then we decide on what we're gonna do.
The administration doesn't feel like it's our position to decide which charity gets money and which charity doesn't get money. We feel like we put the proposal out there, and that's a council call. It's ultimately, when you hear it on WLOX, it's going to be the council chose not to give you any money.
I agree,
Yes.
that's why I proposed to.
So I
Make the necessary revisions. We're waiting on CTA, and then we move forward.
That's our job with the legislative system of the city. We pay the bills and we set the laws. That's what we're all elected for. So whatever you have to do, you have to do it. But you can't be 4 million out. I mean, that's pretty simple. I don't care who you are. You can't be that much money out. So something have to give, you know? And like you said, certain things to be in there, that $500,000, maybe $1 million. Well, $1 million back to that 58 is still $500,000 less than what we took in last year. We took in 59.5. And we only spent 58. That's how we wanted $1.5 million right here. So that's pure numbers.
Ken, could somebody give Ken a microphone? Thank you.
Last year was an anomaly. We had a very good year, and it ended up revenues exceeded the expenditures in the general fund. First time that's happened that I can go back for many years and find. And so Dr. Tisdale alluded to earlier, at one time the city had $60+ million in surplus funds, you know, after Katrina, and they've been living off of that for many years. Like I said, every other year the expenditures has been over the revenues. And what has happened, that $60 million drained down to next to nothing now. And there's nothing there to draw upon, okay? We can't count on, I can tell you, I told Dr. Tisdale one day, I said, y'all need to remember this year, because it's not going to happen again for a long time. We're not going to have another good year like that. We had a real good, we were fortunate last year. We had a real good year on the revenue side, and we saved on the expenditure side, just from actual to budget. And like I said, even the auditors commented to me about it. That's the first time we've seen that many years. And so we've been living off of this, what's considered surplus money, for years and years. Well, that surplus is gone. And so here we are. Another thing is, like they said, 70% of the budget is personnel. 60% of the total revenue budgeted figure is public safety costs, 60% of that. So you got those two things, 70% personnel, 60% public safety. And I know y'all don't want to touch that, but that's huge amounts. We can sit here and nitpick over whether we're going to do CASA or this and that. If you go through that effort, altogether, you might get $150,000 at the most. We're still $3,850,000. So that's where we're at. This is not, it's not an easy fix. And it really boils down to something Jody said a while ago. Either you have the layoffs, or Mike said, or you increase the taxes. That's really, because we didn't just put these numbers together and put them on y'all's desk and say, here, cut the budget. They have been worked and worked. And really, the last 2 years, we've operated on such a tight budget, and I told that to Mike 2 years ago, and I told him that again this past year. And what has happened is we've had to come back to the budget a number of times this year and say, okay, we got to do this, we got to take it out of fund balance. We're fortunate enough that the number that we budgeted in fund balance to begin the year last year was under what we ended. But that's not going to be the case this year. And I told Mike, when we were doing the budget, I said, we're not going to be able to come back to the council and go, hey, we got to have this. I mean, it's got to be done, and it's got to come out of fund balance, because you can't run a deficit budget. The only thing that's keeping us from being totally in a deficit budget is that $8 million that we're starting the year with, that I've worked real hard over the past couple of years to get us there. That's just been through budgeting techniques and everything else. But I'm out of magic. I have them on magic.
It's the head of accounting's job to be the conservative one and to be, if you will, pessimistic at the outcome. He says we won't be able to do what we did this year again next year. I think we will be able to do it. I think we'll exceed our revenue, and I think we'll manage to come in our under our expenses, so we can close the gap during the year. We've done that the last 2 years I've been here. We've been able to close that gap. I think we can do it again. Now the gap's a little bigger this year, but.
Mr. McCune, may I ask you, what was the contributor to why, and don't just say because we spent less, but what was the increase in revenue? What was the contribution to the increase in revenue that you don't think will reoccur? Because right now the economy's doing great. There's more disposable income in every household right now. Gaming revenues are up. Every indicator, including the lottery and all other things, are pointing that there is going to be an increase in all types of economic activity. So why do you think that the revenues will decrease?
Well, because we are, no, they're not going to decrease, okay? We've adjusted the revenue some. We're being optimistic in just about every account in this budget. One of the things is, which I'm okay with, we're budgeting additional sales tax money, say. But one thing that's not being connected there is $253,000 out of our current take-in for sales tax. It's got to come out of that account and go towards that TIF, the Walmart second TIF, which is totally on sales tax. Well, that money that was being generated from that Walmart TIF was going in the general fund sales tax account. That's $253,000. It's got to come out. Next year, it will be out of there. We'll pull it out at some point to pay the bond issue, to pay whatever. But even having said that, we're budgeting an increase for next year. All throughout this budget, we've changed the numbers, like I said, and now they're optimistic all the way through, based upon a good economy and everything else. But even having said that, we still got that $4 million.
Well, that's my question is, if you agree that our revenues should exceed our revenues from last year, the problem is our expenses have gone from 58 to over 63. That's the problem. And so that's the gap we have to understand is why are our expenses going from 68 to 63 plus?
Okay.
And that's, I get that we have 2 fire trucks that are actually going to be amortized over a number of years, and a fire station that's going to be amortized over a number of years, which accounts for about $500,000 on the budget. But now we're talking about another between $4 and $5.5 million that we have to understand why our expenses have increased.
800,000 was for the PERS increase too. That's another,
So
add to that.
1.3, there, now we're down from now we're down from 4.5 to 2.8.
It's $3 million.
3 million, right.
I have a question. I know that we have a budget for each department that is given to us, and it's given to us in about 3 or 4 line items. Can you provide to us a list of each department and each employee and what each employee makes? Can we get that? And then can we also go back for the employees that have been on a number of years?
I don't know, excuse me, Nathan, I don't want names and.
well, that's what I was about to say. We have to be careful about what you give.
But
Position number.
But the other thing is, even with a list of those, it's not going to make a difference. What are we going to decide who to fire, not fire, who to lay off, who not to lay off? That really doesn't move the ball down the field, in my opinion. I didn't mean to step on.
Well, my question was going and go back a few years on that, and we might be able to look at some options there as to cut some salaries. Now I know that we don't have the right to do that, but we can go to that department and say, hey, we're going to cut this department by this amount, and whoever the director of that department is, and we can make a recommendation on that employee number, not a name necessarily, and we can make a recommendation, and either that they can, if we cut it by that amount, that department director can decide what they want to do with that, whatever dollar amount cut it is.
Councilman, just to change the subject for a minute, one of the things you said a few minutes ago, I just want to caution, you talked about taking money out of the capital projects budget and putting it into day-to-day operations.
Can't do that.
The bond money.
That was Robert.
I would give you the one-word answer to that, Pascagoula.
Yeah.
That's what got him in trouble.
Yep.
Well, I'm not saying, yeah, that's not what I was talking about.
I just have a couple of observations. It's been interesting listening. The last time the millage was increased in the city of Biloxi was in 2001. Dixie, you were probably in the 5th grade then. Robert was probably, I don't know. Robert wasn't quite old enough to be employed and pay taxes yet. But here's a couple of points I want to make. The last time the millage was increased was in 1995. It was increased, listen to the millage, from 57.5 mils to 58 mils. Now think about that. If the millage was about what it was back then, we wouldn't be talking about this issue. But gaming came in, generates a lot of revenue, and in 96 to 97 it was lowered and lowered again and lowered again until we leveled off at 30.1 mils, which is where we are now. So in the preceding, 18 years, just figure, I don't know what the rate of inflation is, a point. That's 18% right there. Just think about, I know on the insurance committee we were talking about how much money has been set aside to fund, from the administration to fund the health insurance, and that's not gone up in 10 or 11 years according to Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're dealing with an insurance issue right now, right, George? I mean, and trying to get that right.
Your insurance company committee just met.
Right.
One of the things that has been recommended to us is to reduce the accident benefit and to reduce any other non-standard benefits that we're paying extra for. Right. We're paying $700,000 a month for medical insurance.
Right. And we have another meeting scheduled for that on the 12th. The other thing I'd like to point out is, and I noticed this, it's interesting once you get on the council, it's a quick learning curve. It's hard to keep up. We can appropriate and approve whatever budget you want. How much is spent, what's spent, and when it's spent is through the administration. So, you want to look at our revenue over the past 4 or 5 years. The only year it's been above 60 million in the last 5, 6, 7 years is when we got the BP money that we used for the Economic Development Security Fund. We saved a little money this year. We spent $1.5 million less than anticipated. I mean, that comes at a cost. You don't fill positions. You don't order supplies. If you're talking about cutting $4 million, it's a daunting task. There aren't enough niche expenses to cover $4 million. If you think of it, that's $100,000 cuts. So if you just looked at it in those increments, you're not going to close this $4 million hole.
It's been illuminating, and
That's 4 million right here.
Let me finish, but the expenses, whatever we budget, when you look at, when the dust settles, what we actually spend is always less because the administration does what they have to do to keep the costs down. You can only do so much with the money we have. Now, I always ask these three questions. When's the last time we had a millage increase? I just answered that for you. What does a mill generate? $10 per year per 100,000 of assessed value on a house. And what is, I can't remember my third question now. Kind of feel like Mr. Perry, eliminating the Department of Education. So when I talk with folks, if it's something they'd like to see done in their neighborhood, they'll tell me, I can live with a tax increase for that. I can go along with the taxing. People want to see services. They want to see things done. When you look at how many people we had in each of these departments 10 years ago and how many you have now, and if you got fewer people, I'm thinking in public works, something breaks, it's got to be fixed. You got to fix it. If you don't have the people, maybe you got a piece of equipment that can do that. But it doesn't help much if you got old equipment. You got to get these people from point A to point B.
I'm as frustrated as you all are about some things. I found it very illuminating in these presidential debates when the questioner asked, would you so-and-so raise your hand? Now, I've just given you an opportunity. $80,000 to $100,000 is how much we save by discontinuing the non-standard benefits that are in our health program. Would you vote for that? I'd like to do it. I don't see.
Mike, unfair statement, because this goes back to what I was talking about. Like Paul says, 4 million, that's $100,000. Well, there's a reason why we went from 58 to 63 in 1 year. And it's not because we gave $100,000 raises. It's because we did other things. When you talk about value and millage, property values are going up right now, which would increase our millage, which would increase revenue, because that's what it's based off of. Also, when you talk about expenses going up, our revenues have changed as well. Our budget has grown. It's not just that in 1996, they didn't have a $63 million municipal budget. This has incrementally increased, as well as revenues, because cost of living and property values have also incrementally increased. What we start doing is providing more services than what we can afford to provide. And so what Paul Tisdale alluded to is I talk to people in my neighborhood and they say, I'd agree to raise taxes for that. The problem is they agree to raise taxes and that still never gets done. That's the problem. Is what we're doing is we're talking about raising taxes to provide services that we're already providing. We're not talking about raising taxes so we can provide new services.
If we raise the taxes and close this $4 million gap, we're closing a $4 million gap. We're not giving anything additional than what's on this piece of paper here. So raising taxes is not the solution. There's nothing additional being given by $4 million, even if we raised it to close the complete $4 million gap.
Let's look at the other side. Are we getting ready to shortcut our citizens?
First, can we figure out where this $6 million increase came from? I've got 1.3 written down in the PERS and the fire department. Where is the rest of it?
Another 1.375 of that is an accounting entry, basically, okay, for the lease purchases that I spoke to. I don't know if all of y'all were here the day that I spoke about the lease purchase, the accounting for the lease purchase. In other words, it's a wash. There's a revenue figure for 1.375, and then there's the amount that's going to add to the asset that really covers the whole lease period, but because we have to capitalize the lease, we're putting the budgetary figure all in this first year. So that is 1.375 of the increase.
So out of the $4 million, $4+ million that we need to account for, we can deduct.
No,
Well, then
it's a wash. It's a wash.
then it still doesn't explain where the increase comes from.
Well, it
Because
did
if it's a
be- it
wash,
did-
it would change both revenues and expenditures
It
the
did.
same.
It
That's
did.
right, so that doesn't explain where the $4 million increase is.
Well,
Question. So what you're saying is next year, because of this accounting trick or whatever you're doing, next year it will decrease, our expenditures, if everything stayed the same, would decrease by 1.3 million?
next year, all what you would have is just the debt service side of
And
it.
how much would that be?
That would be for the fire trucks, it'd be 161,000. For the police cars, I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure. Not police cars, the cameras, the body cameras.
So that's a 500,000, 5 point something million.
But you
Or
can do that over
500 something thousand.
4 years? 109,000 a year. 190,000.
So, but my point is, we don't have to figure out, if you're saying that it's increasing the revenues and it's increasing the expenditures equally, then we don't have to figure out how to account for that. We don't have to find some money to cover that because you're saying it's already included in the revenues. So when we look at 59,000 as our revenues and 63 million, or 59 million and 63 million as our expenditures, that 1.7 is already accounted for in this side, and it's already accounted for in this side, so it's a wash. We still have a separation of $4.5 million, and that's what I'm saying. Where is that $4.5 million coming from?
Exactly. That's the figure that has to be made up.
But
It's the
that-
difference, it's
but
the
how
gap.
did- But how did we get to $4.5 million increase? I'm saying I've got 0.8 for the PERS, I get that, and I've got the cost, the annual cost of the fire stuff at half, was it $500,000? 0.5, the 3 something for the station, and the 2 something.
160 for the...
160 for the trucks, 160 for the trucks, and 3 something for the station itself. So we're at like 1.3, so I get where we can account for the increase at 1.3, but there's still.
Wait a second. We was at like 3+ million last year when we adopted the budget.
Can I, how much,
We was at 3+ something million last year. That's what I told y'all.
What was that 3 something million?
That's what the expenditures were over the revenues. Yep.
The budget we adopted last year had a $3 million gap. We're talking about a $4 million gap this year.
But last year.
And I could get another million. You tell me to get another million and let me go.
But
I'll
last year,
get you
our
another million.
actual expenditures ended up being $1 million less than what our actual revenues were, correct?
Our expenditures came in less than revenues.
Yep.
And so,
And they will again this year.
We hope.
I agree if we do the same things, but I still want to understand where we account for that. Now, we do have to account for these true expenses. These are true and actual expenses.
Let's stay out of the weeds if we can.
All right. Now, when you look at the total difference between the revenue and the expense as it relates to without the non-departmental, just the departments, which means the people that work here, all right? It's a $2.8 million increase. That includes 9 Safer Grant firefighters that is going to be reimbursed at 75%, all right? It also includes about, I think, John, 10 or 13. We have additional police officers, all right? Well, we had to
Filling
make them
gaps.
up. Okay, we had to rehire them. We didn't. We budgeted them. You space them out the way we hire them. This is for the full year. Then you have 16 vehicles. Then you have PERS. Then you have some capital outlay items. Okay, he mentioned that capital outlay items as follows: Public Works is $150,000. You have $25,000, I think, in engineering, $50,000 in Parks and Recreation. Joe and them's got some. Hold on.
Not much. That's body cameras and.
Right.
The 9 firefighters that are being reimbursed by 25,000, or by 75%, excuse me.
We have an offset revenue for that.
We do already
75.
have an offset
We
revenue
do.
built in?
We do.
Okay.
So when you add on additional people, you also have to uniform them. You have to give them something to drive. So there are costs involved for insurance and things of that nature when you hire on additional personnel. So it is only 2.8 million, might as well say 2.9. So it is PERS, it is all the things that Mr. Leonard had told, you weren't here, but he gave a little overview that it was 2% PERS. You had the principal and interest for the firehouse, number 7, principal and interest for 2 fire trucks, 9 firefighters, 16 police vehicles, 2 in parks vehicles, 1 in engineering, $150,000 in public works, $44,000 in legislative for the sound system. IT needs $160,000 for our firewall, that if it goes down, the whole city goes down. So that will get you right about where you need to be, Councilman Deming.
Thank you, Joe.
Could you put some numbers with those, what you just give us? Do you have actually numbers that matches that? Like the 2% is 800,000, roughly. What are the numbers for the rest of the stuff? You just got words down here.
Yeah.
I mean, you said 9 firemen, but you're not paying for 9 firemen. You're paying 25% of that.
The fire station's 375, or what was it? 385?
371. It's the fire station. The 2 fire trucks are 160. The additional firefighters, the 9 firefighters.
Now, the only cost to us is the 25%.
135,000 if you use 60 of
Look.
it.
Well, 25% of that is what our costs are.
The 16 police vehicles was like 600,000. The total of public works, engineering, and parks vehicles is about 200,000. The firewall upgrade is 160,000. But look, you want 80,000? Let me cut the non-standard benefits that are in the medical package. That's
We'll decide
80,000.
that, Mike. We're discussing all that now. That's why we have a committee doing that. So we'll discuss that with you. We'll do that and let you know.
Well,
What exactly are the non-standard?
the two non-standard benefits that we're talking about, number one's called the accident benefit. That's a benefit that if somebody has an accident, they get like a AFLAC, like they immediately get a check. The other one, the other non-standard benefit is the 100% coverage for inpatient.
But that's just to help us get back to closer to reality now.
Right.
It's not really going to affect the budget.
No.
It's a cost.
It's a cost.
It's a cost.
It's cost.
That part of that $700,000 a month that we pay.
Yeah.
I know it's a small thing.
Well,
You start, but this whole project starts with small things. You know, small things that we have to cut. You want me to cut the mayor's travel budget? I can cut the mayor's travel budget. Let me cut the medical insurance budget.
well, we might end up having to dump 500,000 for this year in there.
Don't worry about it. This is about next year.
Well, I'll bring up something I brought up last year.
Says
Y'all want to
if-
look at $4.285 million. Once again, listen, let me speak a little bit. You got it sitting in the economic development, just sitting there. You need to take that 2.285, put it back in the general fund. The other 2 million go back in the debt service. Sitting right there on the page, $4,285,000, and just sitting there. There's no sense in sitting there. Not doing any good. We put it in there to do something. Yeah, we don't need that now. Get rid of the economic development thing. Even who said it? Ken said we don't even have somebody running it anymore. So that's $4,285,000 sitting right there. Take that 2.285, put it in the general fund. That's not going to balance nothing. It has money sitting in your fund. The 2 million actually come out of debt service, needs to pay back to debt service. But I mean, that's 4.285 million right there on that page, just sitting there. And we sitting there talking about $4 million. And as far as what Ken said, we didn't spend all 60 million. I mean, our general fund, the government fund, this thought this year was 30 million. They had a lot of money, but they didn't really spend it all. We still have money sitting, we got 36 million, I mean, sitting in an account, but it's restricted money, and you got cash money, you got balanced fund. I mean, that's all part of the CPA numbers, you know, so that's not doing anything. I mean, talk about the 63 that used to be there, don't get it. But you, right here, real number, 4.285 million sitting right here.
Well, honestly, I feel your pain, to put it in Bill Clinton words. It's very uncomfortable starting a budget year with a $4 million gap, even though we did it with a $3 million gap last year and a $3 million gap the year before. So if it's going to take getting another million squeezed out of that to make you comfortable, I'll do that. If you'll back me. Because it's going to be painful, but we need to do it.
Yeah, that'll leave a $3 or $3.5 million hole, right?
Which is the same hole that we
It's a
had when
small
we went
hole.
into this current budget year.
Sure. I'm curious to see what kind of cuts or the recommendations.
Well, a lot of it will be capital equipment.
So, what I hear is that number is overcomable. I mean, we can overcome that, but I think he's right. I think that economic development fund that we plugged money into that was just sitting there for potential possible uses, that's a great opportunity to support what we need to make sure that we can fund projects and vehicles. You know, we could buy cars, patrol cars or fire trucks with that money, which would help us in the short run on these budgets. That also helps us with puts us in a position we talked about last year, and I remember talking to the mayor about it, and he agreed that these capital projects we know have a shelf life on these items. Why we're not creating enterprise accounts or whatever we need to create, so that way a percentage of every year goes to those things. So in 10 years, when that fire truck needs to be replaced, or 7 years, or whatever it is, we have the money set aside. We've generated it over every single year. We've put, if it's, how much is one truck?
$500,000.
$500,000. So over 10 years, we put $50,000 into an enterprise fund for fire trucks or cop cars or trucks. I mean, each one of these departments should have a capital budget that gets funded. We should have an expenditure of, everything has a life expectancy, and we should look at those. And we talked about that. Why don't we start doing that? We have, and he's right, we have that money set aside for economic development. I think it would be a better use of our money to start doing that and preparing for the future instead of hoping we can tread water every single year and put money in a magic fund that's going to create some economic surplus down the road that hasn't generated any fruition. All of these little things, these projects that we've done and we continue to pump money into, haven't bore out any real revenues or generated anything down the road. It's just been an expense. And so I think that's a great opportunity to address those types of things that need to be addressed in the future. George, good call on bringing that up. Great.
Hey, right, wow.
I know. Look,
Can we get a selfie?
I'm going to go home and take my temperature because I'm probably sick. But no, I think that, I mean, bringing that to our attention is a great thing, because there's a lot of money sitting there that can help us get over the hump for capital expenditures that we need right now, and then we can start preparing for the future by putting aside a capital amount every year based off the expectancy, the life expectancy of all of those capital assets.
Ken, what's the balance of the economic development security?
Well, 2.1 million, I think.
Yeah, I think it's like 2.1, but I would just throw this out, because this would have to be addressed before you could do anything like what we're talking about. Right now, there is committed, so much of that money is committed. $500,000 for downtown loans or whatever, downtown.
And incentive grants.
Yeah, housing, downtown housing or something like that. And then you got $180,000 for a coding academy in there. So that's $680,000 of that money's y'all voted and committed, okay? Now, there is some money, I'd have to go back and look, that is committed in the capital project fund, but I don't think it's a whole
Change,
bunch.
about chump change.
I think it's it's maybe 100,000, I'm not sure, I'd have to go look,
That's weeds.
yeah. So, anyway,
So even
those things would have
Got
to,
that 6,
Huh?
whatever. What'd you say, it was 2.1 remaining?
2.1, yeah.
But he said there,
2.1.
but some of that's encumbered.
I've gone
It's
by with
encumbered,
that. Yes.
basically.
About
Yes.
600,000 is, so we have 1.5 million that's not encumbered yet.
Correct.
I don't know what the coding accounting is. Can refresh me, my memory on what that is.
That was something they was planning on opening up the city itself. And set aside 100, that's for coding.
The mayor was looking at a coding academy, which has been done in some cities,
so
technology,
but-
high-speed
Something we
internet.
don't
If there
need.
hasn't been anything done in reliance to that, can't we decommit that?
Just said that,
We could decommit that immediately. I mean, and that would return that amount to our budget. I'm just saying that's a possibility. We could. I don't know about the housing grants. I think, has there been some work on the housing grants already, right? Has there been anything? Can we decommit that, or is that already in the process? I'm not going to say that we should attempt to decommit or walk back something that's been started already.
Right.
Has it been
that
started?
was, Robert, that was 500,000. It was
That's right.
25,000 for residential built above the buildings.
So even if we look at that 4, that's 100,000, right? At the most. Right, and it could be a lower amount than it could be the maximum. So, I mean, there's an opportunity to even remove some of that and spend it on things that we need immediately. Look, just a suggestion, Felix. I know you're grabbing the mic because I talked about the housing, but it's just a suggestion, and I'm not even suggesting that we decommit that, but there is a 1.5 balance in that fund that would go towards helping some of these capital expenditures that we really need to address right now.
The only thing I have to say to that is, don't forget, in any city that want to grow and thrive, we have to invest. And so if you're taking away from the things we invest for our future, then we're going to stay where we're at, and we'll always be walking backwards.
But we gotta get to the future. That's the first
What
step.
about properties? I know
I've
that,
got $50,000 in the budget right now for sale of property.
I know that this question has been asked many times by different council people. What about the library? Can we sell that? The old library?
The old library, actually, we have a lease in place right now that allows us at the 3-year point to sell that property,
Okay, and how far in are we into that lease?
a year and a half away.
2 years?
Mhm.
We're 2 years in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's the penalty if we sell it before that?
Well, the other unknown really is how much money FEMA's going to ask us back since they
That's my question is, what is
since
the
they
penalty?
renovated the building for us.
If we were to sell early,
That was like
what would the penalty
$500,000.
be? So the 100% of the amount that they put into it?
Until the day we negotiate with them, we don't know what they would
How much
ask us.
did they put into it?
I would think they would depreciate that amount by some total.
But
Probably
don't
a
they have
few
a time?
100,000 anyway.
They put a few
Jerry.
100,000 into it?
So we would maybe clear,
Do they have a time limit though? I mean, you can't, that don't last forever, FEMA. Yeah, I mean, it's been longer than that. You're talking about 2000, yeah. So those things, yeah, that's gone.
as I said, we put 50,000 in the budget for sale of property. We can probably do better than that. We even put $125,000 in the budget for running the new ticket booth at the parking lot and down in the Margaritaville area. That's in the budget. So, we're trying to find those opportunities.
So we have to build that? The $125,000 ticket booth. You can't do it. The guy wants to sell the tickets. Let him do it.
That's the
Parking garage?
anticipated revenue of running, for a whole year, of running that ticket booth, selling parking and Point Cadet.
Oh, that's to get to 352. That's Kavasovich property you're talking about?
Correct.
Yeah, that's 352,000. That's the city gets.
We get the first of that.
Then we split the other with the state.
Anything over 300-some-odd-thousand, we have to share with the state.
And how about the override money with Golden Nugget, is it up? It was over 500,000. What is it this year?
The,
We get 167,000 of that.
I think the number is 3.3 million that's in the budget. I go back to if, I guess we're gonna have to meet again. I heard you want to have a committee and scrub the non-department list. I'd be happy to work with you on that. I know I can, through capital equipment mostly, that I can get an easy $1 million out of the budget. But again, we're betting on the future on next year. We can't drive the same equipment forever. But I can get $1 million out of that budget on capital equipment. I can trim some of the department budgets, some of their admin costs and so forth.
You made a statement a little earlier as well. You said that you believe that we'll exceed our anticipated revenue this year like we did last year. Okay,
But slightly.
I meant, are you talking anything significant, or
No,
you just think we'll hit it and maybe go over a little bit, or?
Well, based on, I've got the numbers through period 10, and we're right on budget, which was, what was the budget for, Ken, you remember? The $18.5 million, 18.750 was the budget for gaming tax, and we're right on budget to do that. On sales tax, we're about 300,000 over budget, which was the 12.4 million for sales tax. We're running about 300,000 better, but we haven't seen our July numbers yet.
And some of the sales tax is for the TIF, so it
away
really
next
didn't
year.
come to us.
Right, but we're running-
So if it's 300,000 up, it's really a wash, more or less, roughly.
So the big three, ad valorem, sales, and gaming, that makes up 60% of our budget. We're at or are just slightly above budget right now with 10 periods out of the 12. So we will, unless we have a storm, every sentence in that's a given. Unless we have a storm,
Can
we
everyone
will
knock
exceed
on
the revenue
wood?
budget.
Just jinxed us. I'm like,
We,
knock on wood.
and we do not have revenue interruption insurance, do we?
We do not.
So if we did in fact have a storm, a significant storm, whatever significant means, then we have no revenue interruption
Correct.
insurance. And I don't know what it would cost these days. I'll just leave it at that.
So, in answer to your question, Councilman Barrett, we will exceed revenue this year unless there's some event that prevents that. We are, at this point, through period 10, right on or above budget. We're right on for gaming. We're ahead of budget on ad valorem. We're ahead of budget on sales tax. So we are going to exceed revenue for this year. And our expenses are going to come in less than budgeted expenses. So there will be some income cash growth unless we have, now, one of the ones that's hanging out there right now is our medical insurance. I've shown you we're $300,000 to the bad right now on medical insurance,
Right.
which is one of the reasons I keep pushing on.
But even with your optimism, we're still looking at that $4 million hole, right?
Well, that's where we stand today.
Right.
Yeah, even in a great year, you're going to have 60 million, the most you're going to have revenue-wise. I mean, it's not really much more than 60 million.
That's the big picture right now. That's a really, really big picture. Beginning cash balance, 8 million, 6 million in revenue, and that's where we are at 6 million and change on revenue, 64 million in expenses, and finishing the year with cash balance of 4 million. That's the gross numbers right now.
So to close that hole, you can increase the millage, you can decrease expenses, or a combination of the two. I know that meeting over there is more interesting, but I haven't. But
Right.
okay.
I can get another million out of that budget, a very painful million. But I can't really get do any better than that
I
on the expense
understand
side.
that. But that, from what I heard today, there's some council members who will gladly find $2 million for you. Thanks.
About 100.
I think these-
Counts 100 and something.
These are all useful ideas. Councilman Deming, you talked about enterprise funds. The beauty of the water sewer fund is that the council had the guts 4 years ago, at the beginning of, actually, the end of the last council, to increase our rates, our water rates, very, very slightly. The fourth year of that increase is this year. This is the first year in many, many years that we actually made money in water sewer, and we're actually able to go out and do projects with the money that we made and not have to borrow. We have 5 water sewer loans that over time that have been borrowed so that we could do water sewer, and for once we're actually doing the work ourselves. So that's the beauty of those enterprise funds. You talk about, the fire chief told us that he's going to need, another half dozen fire trucks maybe not in this council's time, but perhaps in the next council.
Well, so I think that's right, and that's great. And the beauty of enterprise funds, especially that water fund, is that the water comes directly from the users and right into that fund. Whereas what we have to do with our capital, if we create capital enterprise funds for our departments, we have to be vigilant enough every year to appropriate money from our revenues into that every year. And that's incumbent upon us to do that. I think it's a great idea, and I think we need to commit ourselves to doing that. But it's a little bit different than the water fund because we don't get the opportunity to misuse the water fund.
Right, we have to use it.
Whereas I think we'd have to be careful and
Yeah, one of the interesting things about both of those enterprise funds is they pay back into the general fund over $1 million back into the general fund from the water, sewer, and port funds. So they act like a business and they pay their administrative costs back to the city.
But again, I think it differs from it differs from the structure in which the funds for capital would actually work, because we wouldn't have monies generated by the police department or the fire department to go directly into that capital fund. We would have to agree to appropriate a percentage every year towards that fund based off what we think that the long-term residual effect is of having to replace assets.
Do
Do you understand what I'm getting
I
at?
do. But you're saying, the key to it is to grow this number. We got to grow this number. Got to get this number back.
Right, absolutely.
So just to remind everybody who may not have made all of these budget workshops, and they are riveting, the next time we'll be able to look at a bond issue is not for a couple of years, simply because we're right. Yeah, so the next couple of years, we're going with what we approved in the 2019 series at $14 million.
How much does that new bond that we took out account towards this?
We have not raised our millage to debt service in a good while. The millage to debt service is what, 9.2 mils?
9.2.
Same 9.2 we had 2 years ago and 3 years ago. So that's the amount of millage or taxes that we pay for debt service has stayed pretty consistent.
And you have 2 million sitting in that economic development, where 2 million that came from. That is owed back to the debt service.
It is.
Right.
That's the way
So that
the
money-
resolution sets it up.
Right. That's why you can stay at 9.2. That works out fine.
So
That's roughly 600,000, 6 million we pay in our debt service. So that's not a problem.
So we could take $1 million, if we did away with the program, out of the economic fund, we could take $1.5 million of that if we did away with that coding program. If we decommitted that money from that coding program, we could add $1.5 million
To the general fund.
To the general fund to take care. So we would still have the same expenses and revenue, but it would just make our beginning cash larger
For this year.
for this year. So we could cut $1.5 million of that 4 off if we did that.
Yeah.
If
You're gonna
you
have
hear
to
what
reverse-
Mike's saying, we could cut $1.5 million off. And I think if he gets it down to 3 and he believes that our revenues are going to exceed where they're at and the expenditures are going to be reduced to the extent that they were last year and keep it under that margin, then we'll be able to exceed our expenditures via our increased revenues. That's what you believe the trajectory of what your expenses are over the year, right? I mean, you're saying that you were able to save us, you were able to not spend $3 or $4 million based off of what you projected our expenses were going to be, and you think that you can do the same thing this year, that if we got to 63, you would be able to keep our expenses down.
Well, and look, we need to adopt the resolution for the millage at that first meeting in September. So we need to get whatever decide, you know, in the next couple of weeks.
It seems clear to me that the council collectively doesn't have an appetite for a tax increase. If that's the case, we'll keep driving in that direction, and we'll drive it on the expense side. Get the number down.
Mike, I think that your estimation of what collectively the council feels may be correct. I think that looking at your performance last year in being able to reduce your projected expenditures to below what our actual revenues were doesn't give me any belief that we should raise millage. If you're able to recreate that same thing this year, why would we increase revenue? I mean, why would we increase the millage rate? Thank you.
It would also help if we get, one of the things that happened to us this year is the employees are now participating to a greater extent in their medical insurance. That was a help. The increased charges for water and sewer, which you get a chance to do one more time this year. All those little things chip away and make it easier for us to close that gap. So the council has to explain this as well.
Yeah, it was a tough thing because we'd actually trying on raising all the employees like 2% or 3%, and now we can't even get to that picture. We talked about trying to raise all the employees 2% at least, or maybe 3%, and now you're $4 million out. I mean, that's, once again, they're not going to get the raise, And that's why you try to protect the insurance and everything else we're doing, to protect the employees the best you can. I mean, the city's run by the employees, and what they do, it makes us go. They do it. The director's supposed to run them. That's how the system works. So if we got people in the system not working, then shame on the directors. Do we got people not doing their job? I mean, I really don't know. I'm not here every day. We got 600 some employees. Somebody's working, I hope, somewhere. We're paying out plenty of money, but it's always been 70% of the budget, 67% of the budget. Employees has always been that. So I mean, that's all part of it. So once again, we're gonna sit here and not raise employees once again, you know, so.
All right, when are you wanting to set the next budget hearing?
I don't care how many meetings y'all set. That's up to y'all.
Hold on. Huh? Sounds good.
Do we want to, what day?
This budget's gotta be in place by October, you know, so you pass the budget pretty much some, October the 1st, right? So most of the time it's September the 15th. Yeah, so I mean, you don't have to have a public hearing the 3rd if you're not finished with your budget. You just have it before you have, you can have it anytime you want. You don't have to have it the first Thursday, Tuesday. You don't have to be the 3rd. All you gotta do is have it before you pass the budget. You can pass the budget, you can have the public hearing on the 15th to pass the budget in the same day. We've done that before.
Yeah, and we don't have to have the budget finalized to have a public hearing. The public hearing is to just get input, to
Right.
open the council up to hearing if they have any input into what they see as a priority or this or that, this or that. It's not necessarily to say, you know, here's this figure, here's that. It's to get their input into the budget process.
Just that you can have same day, you know?
And we are supposed to have something available if somebody wants to look at it.
What days do we all?
Monday at 1:30. Let's just keep budget meetings on Mondays at 1:30. It's just to stay consistent.
All right, the consensus is Monday at 1:30.
Wait a minute. We got that meeting, what time we have that meeting?
What meeting?
The 12th with the insurance, isn't that next week? The 12th, that meeting's at 1:30. Yeah, the special meeting for about bringing in the health thing, getting everybody involved and doing better with the health and everything.
It's on the 12th, that's a Monday, it's on the 12th at 2 o'clock.
Can y'all just push that back or come meet earlier?
Well, it doesn't matter to me. We have to make sure everybody knows we can have it after that. We can have that thing afterwards if you want, unless it lasts too long. You sound like the rest of the insurance people. They've been trying to get us off that standard plan for 19 years. Because you'll never ever go back to what they get on that standard plan. And yes, there's some things in there that's good and some maybe not so good. But the insurance people have been trying to get rid of that standard plan for 19 years, Mike. Because they don't like it. It's too good of a program for the city.
Okay, so when are we having the meeting? Monday at 1:30? All right, all in favor?
That'd be good.
All right, who motions it?
So we have to make sure we call.
Motion by
Si.
Timming, second by Mr. Guines. All in favor? All in favor? Unanimous votes? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Guines, second by Mr. Dimming. All in favor? All in favor? Unanimous vote.